The iron gates of Fort Ridge stood tall and unforgiving, their black bars casting long shadows across the concrete as the morning sun climbed higher. It was a routine shift for the gate guards: check IDs, salute officers, wave vehicles through. Nothing ever changed here, or so they believed. When the woman approached on foot, dressed in a neatly pressed combat uniform with her cap low and her posture unmistakably disciplined, the guards barely glanced at her rank. Their eyes skimmed assumptions forming faster than protocol. "Ma'am, you can't enter through this gate," one of the guards said, raising his hand casually. "Personnel entrance is on the east side." She stopped. Not abruptly, not offended, just calmly, like someone used to being challenged by people who didn't yet know who they were dealing with. "I'm expected," she replied. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. The kind forged through years of command briefings, battlefield radio calls, and moments where hesitation meant death. The younger guard exchanged a glance with his partner. They were used to recruits, visiting officers, civilian staff, never someone like her. A woman alone, walking toward a high-security gate without a vehicle or escort. "With all respect, ma'am," the older guard added, adjusting his rifle strap, "we haven't been notified. I'll need to see authorization." She nodded once and reached into her pocket, producing a simple identification card. No dramatic flourish, no impatience. The guard took it and froze. His eyes moved from the name to the insignia, to the rank. His grip tightened. For a brief second, the world seemed to pause. Before he could react, she gently retrieved the card and met his gaze. "Protocol matters," she said evenly. "You did your job." Behind her calm exterior, memories stirred. First days of training when she was told women didn't belong here, whispered doubts echoing through barracks halls, instructors who tested her harder just to see her break. She never did. She had learned early that respect in uniform wasn't given. It was earned through sweat, silence, and sacrifice. Inside the base, life continued unaware. Cadets jogged past, laughing. Vehicles rumbled. Orders were shouted across training grounds. No one knew that the woman standing at the gate, being momentarily delayed by procedure, was the very officer who would soon command this entire installation. The guards finally snapped to attention. "Yes, ma'am," one blurted out, voice tight with shock. "Permission to open the gate." She gave a small nod. As the gates slowly parted, the metallic creak echoed like a drumroll. She stepped forward, boots striking the concrete with measured confidence. No smile, no smirk, just purpose. She had waited years for this assignment, not for power, but for responsibility, for the chance to lead differently. To be the commander she once needed but never had. Behind her eyes lay countless unseen battles, nights spent writing letters she never sent, missions that haunted her dreams, moments of quiet loneliness masked by discipline. She had lost friends, she had buried emotions, she had carried the weight of expectations, hers and everyone else's, and yet she stood. As she walked deeper into the base, conversations slowly died around her. Soldiers noticed her insignia. Whispers spread, heads turned. Who is she? Why does she walk like that? Why does it feel like the air just changed? At the far end of the yard, a group of cadets paused their drills, curiosity creeping into their expressions. None of them recognized her face. None of them knew her story, but soon they would. She paused briefly, inhaling the familiar scent of oil, dust, and discipline. This place, like her, had scars, and she was here not to dominate it, but to shape it. To prove something, not to them, but to every girl who had ever been told she was too weak, too emotional, too out of place to lead. The gates closed behind her, and with that sound, a new chapter began. The training yard fell strangely quiet. It wasn't a command that silenced it. No whistle, no barked order. It was her presence, the kind that didn't demand attention, yet claimed it effortlessly. She walked forward at an unhurried pace, boots steady against the concrete. Each step carried the weight of experience, of nights spent awake listening to distant gunfire, of mornings that began with loss reports instead of sunrise. Around her, cadets slowed their drills, eyes following her without fully understanding why. A group of young soldiers stood near the obstacle course, sweat, soaked uniforms clinging to their backs. One of them nudged another and muttered something under his breath. A few smirked. "She looks lost." One whispered, not quietly enough. Another chuckled, probably admin or inspection staff. She heard them, of course she did. She had heard worse, louder, closer to enemy lines. She stopped several feet away from them, her gaze steady, unreadable. Silence stretched, awkward, heavy. "Who's in charge of this platoon?" she asked. The question was simple, the tone was not. A young cadet stepped forward, confidence bordering on arrogance. "That would be me, ma'am." She studied him for a moment, not critically, not harshly. Just observantly. She saw potential and impatience. She saw herself years ago before life had sharpened her edges. At ease, she said. The cadets hesitated, confused by her authority yet unsure of her role. Slowly, they relaxed, too much. One rested his weight on a hip. Another adjusted his gloves casually. Mistake. She circled them slowly, hands behind her back. "Do you know what this base exists for?" she asked. "To train soldiers, ma'am." Someone answered. She stopped behind him. "Wrong." The cadet stiffened. "This base exists to prepare leaders for moments when there is no room for error," she said calmly. Moments when hesitation costs lives. Moments when assumptions get people killed. Her eyes locked onto the one who had laughed earlier. "Tell me," she continued, "what assumption did you make when you saw me walk in?" The cadet swallowed. "I speak clearly," she said, not raising her voice. "I assumed you weren't command staff." Silence again. She nodded slowly. "And why is that?" No answer. She stepped closer. "Because I'm a woman." The word landed like a dropped weapon. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. One opened his mouth, then closed it. She straightened. "Let me tell you something you won't find in your manuals. The battlefield does not care who you think belongs there. Bullets don't hesitate. Explosions don't discriminate." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I have led men through terrain you've only seen on maps. I have carried wounded soldiers twice my size. I have made decisions that haunted me and saved lives at the same time." Her voice softened, but somehow became more dangerous. "And every time someone doubted me, I let results speak." At that moment, a senior officer approached hurriedly from across the yard, face pale, posture rigid. "Ma'am," he began, snapping to attention. "I wasn't informed you'd be arriving this early." The cadet stared. "Ma'am, arriving early." The officer turned sharply toward them. "Stand at attention." They snapped upright instantly. "This," he said, voice tight, "is your new commanding officer." The air changed. Color drained from faces, eyes widened, pride collapsed into disbelief. The cadet who had laughed stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. She turned to face them once more. "This conversation isn't over," she said. "But understand this respect isn't about rank alone. It's about discipline, awareness, and humility." She met their eyes one by one. "You will learn all three under my command. No threat, no shouting." Just certainty. As she walked away, the cadets remained frozen, hearts pounding. For the first time since arriving at the base, they felt it. Not fear, not shame, but something heavier, accountability. Behind her composed stride, she carried her own quiet storm. She knew this was only the beginning. Resistance would come. Doubt would linger, but so would growth. And she was ready, because she hadn't fought her way here to be underestimated again. She had come to change the meaning of command. The announcement echoed longer than it should have. Your new commanding officer. The words didn't just hang in the air. They pressed down on every cadet standing in the yard. No one spoke, no one moved. The woman they had dismissed, joked about, underestimated, now stood revealed not as an outsider, but as the authority they would answer to every single day. The senior officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, the command staff is assembled and awaiting you." She nodded once. "I'll join them shortly." As the officer stepped away, the cadets remained frozen at attention, backs stiff, eyes forward. Sweat trickled down temples, not from training, but from realization. She turned back toward them slowly, not with anger, with clarity. "Some of you are embarrassed right now," she said. "Good, that means you're learning." Her eyes stopped on one cadet, the same one who had laughed earlier. His jaw was tight, shame flickering behind forced discipline. "Dismissed," she ordered. They exhaled collectively and broke formation, boots shuffling awkwardly as they scattered. Whispers followed her path, but no one dared speak loudly. She walked toward the command building, each step echoing against her thoughts. This moment, this reveal, should have felt triumphant. It didn't, because she had lived it before. Different bases, different faces. Same disbelief. Inside the building, the mood shifted instantly. Officers stood straighter. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Salutes snapped sharply into place. She returned them without pause. In the briefing room, she stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the surface. Faces around her waited, curious, cautious, some clearly skeptical. "I'll keep this brief," she began. She spoke of standards, of accountability, of readiness, but then her voice changed. "I won't tolerate disrespect disguised as humor. I won't ignore ignorance masked as tradition, and I won't allow this base to fail its people, especially not because of ego." A few officers shifted uncomfortably. She saw it. She always did. Outside, the cadets regrouped near the barracks, the shock still rippling through them. "Did you see her insignia?" One whispered. "I thought she was admin." Another muttered. The cadet who had laughed earlier sat heavily on a bench, staring at the ground. His hands trembled slightly. "I messed up," he said quietly. No one argued. That evening, she stood alone in her temporary quarters, removing her cap and setting it carefully on the desk. The silence was loud. It always was after moments like this. She loosened her collar and finally allowed herself to breathe. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, eyes strong but tired. Beneath the uniform, beneath the rank, she was still the girl who once cried quietly in a bunk bed, wondering if she had made a mistake choosing this life. She remembered the first time she'd been passed over for leadership, not because of performance, but because someone said the men won't listen to her. They did eventually because she made them better. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Yes," she said. The door opened cautiously. The cadet stepped inside, posture rigid, eyes fixed forward. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Granted, I was wrong today," he said, voice strained but honest. "I judged you before I knew you. I disrespected the uniform." She waited. "I won't make that mistake again." She stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to be heard. "You didn't disrespect me," she said. "You disrespected yourself and the standard you're supposed to uphold." He swallowed, "But you showed up." She continued, "That matters." He nodded sharply, relief and resolve mixing in his eyes. "Dismissed," she said. As the door closed, she sat on the edge of her bed, exhaustion finally settling in. Command wasn't about moments like today, it was about what came after, earning trust, breaking habits, changing minds without breaking spirits. Outside, the base lights flickered on one by one. Tomorrow, training would begin again, but nothing would feel the same, because now they knew, and knowing changes everything. A sharp whistle cut through the darkness, slicing into sleep like a blade. Barracks lights flicked on one by one as groans echoed down the halls. Cadets stumbled into formation, boots half, laced, eyes heavy. Then they saw her. She stood at the edge of the field, perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back. The floodlights cast long shadows across the ground, but her posture didn't bend beneath them. She had been there before the whistle. Before the excuses, before the doubt. "Good morning," she said calmly. No one replied. "From this moment forward," she continued, "you will learn what leadership demands when comfort is gone." She turned and began walking, without looking back. Follow, they ran, through wet grass and gravel paths, through obstacle courses slick with morning dew. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She simply set the pace, and expected them to keep up. By mid-morning, legs trembled. Pride cracked. A cadet stumbled during a carry drill, dropping his partner hard onto the mat. "Stop," she ordered. The group froze, chests heaving. She approached slowly. "What failed here?" The cadet struggled to speak. "Grip, ma'am," she nodded. "And what happens when your grip fails in the field?" No one answered. "Someone dies," she said softly. That silence hurt more than yelling ever could. By afternoon, tempers flared. One cadet muttered under his breath. She heard it. She stopped the entire unit. "Say it again," she said. He froze. "Say it," she repeated, voice steady. "I said, this is unnecessary," he admitted. She studied him, not angry, not offended. "Step forward." He did. She turned to the others. "What you call unnecessary," she said, "is what keeps your teammate alive when your plan collapses." She faced him again. "Do you want to quit?" "No, ma'am." "Then earn your place." He nodded and rejoined the line. Changed. As days passed, fatigue stripped away arrogance. Complaints turned into focus. Mockery turned into quiet respect. They began saluting sharper, listening closer, working together. One evening, during a live fire exercise, a cadet froze mid-movement, panic flashing in his eyes. She was beside him instantly. "Breathe," she said. "Look at me." Her hand steadied his rifle. "You're not alone." He exhaled, steadied, fired. Later, he would say that moment saved his career. That night, she stood alone on the training field, watching the moon rise over tired soldiers who no longer laughed at her presence. Respect wasn't demanded. It was built, rep by rep, decision by decision. Inside her quarters, she removed her boots slowly. Her feet ached. Her shoulders burned. Leadership carried a cost no medal showed. She thought of home, of birthdays missed, of messages unread, of tears wiped away before dawn. She thought of why she stayed, because somewhere out there was a young girl who would see a woman command without apology, and believe she could too. The next morning, the cadets stood straighter before she even arrived. When she did, they snapped to attention without being told. She looked at them. "You're improving," she said. That was all, but it meant everything.